Good morning, everybody. So, simple and free. This is where the rubber hits the road, so I hope you're all excited this morning. I have got so much to say. I'm going to have to really censor myself because I could talk for hours this morning. But for those of you who don't know what simple and free actually is, because maybe you weren't here last month, we've been, we're about to, we haven't been because this is the start really, but last month I talked about the general premise of simple and free. I talked about what it means for us, how we might be feeling about it, and what sorts of things we might choose to do. Hopefully those of you who do know what it is have had a chance to reflect on it and hopefully to talk to one another about it. Those who weren't, throughout this year we're going to explore 7 areas of our lives. We're going to give ourselves a month for each one, so over 12 months we've got a bit of space, which is good. We're going to make some short-term changes, or have the opportunity to make some short-term changes that might have some long-term impact in each of these 7 areas which are up there. Changes which might have an impact on our lifestyles, on our health and our well-being, on our relationships with one another, and maybe most importantly, on our relationship with God. We hope we're going to be challenging ourselves, learning new things, exploring what discipleship, becoming more like Jesus, and getting to know him might actually mean in a practical sense. And I just want to remind you all, it's not about rules, it's not about guilt. It's not about me standing up here telling you what to do, or Chris or somebody else telling you what to do. It's an invitation. It's an opportunity. And hopefully it's going to give us the potential for new freedom in our lives, not yet more rules. So this month we're going to explore food as our first area. So food is the classic area of our lives which we maybe associate with fasting. If anyone's done a fast before, it's typically food. It's also, if you look at the Bible, when God talked about fasting, it was food that was prominent. It wasn't the only thing, but it was the most prominent area. So it's a good one to start with for this, because it is linked. Something about food that's really important is that it's something we can't live without. Miracles aside, we know God can do anything, but generally speaking, we can't live long-term without food. So this is kind of a really important part of our lives. It's essential for well-being. It can be a pleasure and a joy, and it's a gift from God. It's really good. It's a good thing. So for those of you who've read the book, you probably already realised that Jen Hatmaker actually did something quite extreme when she did Simple and Free, or 7 as it was called in the first place. So this is all based on a book. She limited herself to just 7 foods just for a month, but 7 foods for a month, that's pretty hardcore, I think. It was a range of foods. They were mostly healthy, non-processed whole foods. She made sure that she kind of got a balance, but it was extremely restrictive. So I want to encourage everyone here to take a completely different approach. I don't want anybody to be doing anything that restrictive. I've got a number of broad suggestions that I believe could be much better for us. And I'm also aware that this area of out of the 7 is the one that could be the most harmful if we, take it to extreme. And in general, it's the area where the most harm could be done. But I really want to encourage you to consider carefully and make sure the decisions you make are tailored to your personal situation, to your personal medical needs, and that you are sensitive to both your own and other people's struggles in this area. At this point, I just want to be honest about my background. I'd love to tell you my whole story. I've got so much to say. But basically, I used to be a dietitian. I worked for 6 years in Bedford Hospital, based in Bedford Hospital. It was a very, very varied role. I did a degree and then I trained for 2 years to do that. And I worked with people in the hospital and in the community. I taught groups like this. I did one-to-one consultations with people. I worked with very poorly patients in the hospital, making sure that they had alternative forms of nutrition if they couldn't eat properly or enough. And I helped people with a wide range of complex health problems that then had an impact on their nutritional needs. So I gave that up, and I lost my registration when I had Esther, and I changed to childminding, which is, again, I've had a lot of, I've done a lot of teaching in nutrition and healthy lifestyles and stuff through that as well, and I have to be registered with the council and all of that. But that's kind of a bit of my background that's probably most relevant. And I've always loved food, and I still do, and so, you know, and health as well, so that's really important to me. So I wanted to quickly set the scene and make sure that we're all up to speed with what healthy eating actually is. Because I think that's a really important kind of building block for the rest. So healthy eating can be very individualised. That's why we need dietitians and people like that are going to help you to interpret what you need to do for yourself. But there is a kind of broad, generalised kind of guide. This is the Eat Well guide up here. There is a generalised kind of pattern of what we need to eat broadly to be healthy. If we don't eat in that sort of healthy way, we'll probably survive. Mostly, it's not going to kill us, not in an immediate sense, but we probably won't thrive. So what we're thinking about is what God's made us to thrive. He wants us to thrive. So if there are things that we can do to make that happen, that's brilliant. So there are loads of different nutrients and chemicals that your body needs to be healthy. And our understanding of that's still growing. It's an area where we don't know it all yet, of course, like any science. It's important to have not only the correct nutrients, but the right quantities and proportions for you. And it's possible to have too much and too little of any one thing. And also, as part of our diets, we do consume other, chemicals that are not necessarily necessary nutrients. So, the Eat Well guide is it's a practical guide to what rough kind of amounts of different types of foods we need to stay healthy. It's a yardstick. It's not perfect. It gets reviewed regularly, but it gives us a good idea. It's a good visual aid, I think. So you can see in the middle, it's like a pie chart or a plate. It used to be called the Eat Well plate. And those are the main foods that we need. And there's some other information on there about food labelling and how much fluid we need as well. So if you go around the pie chart, the plate, you can see about a third of it, the green section. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's all fruit and vegetables of one kind or another. So about a third of what we eat needs to be, if we're going to be optimally healthy, it needs to be fruit and vegetables. A whole wide range of fruit and vegetables, because each one has got different nutrients in that we need. So the more variety you can have, the better. It equates to at least 5 a day, 5 portions a day. Most people think 5 a day is like the goal, but actually that's like a low bar in a sense. Ideally, we need more than 5. It doesn't just include fresh stuff. You can have dried, frozen, tinned fruit and veg. They all count. They don't always have as many benefits, but they're still good for us. Fruit and veg contain a lot of water, but also fibre, vitamins, minerals, and a lot of other little nutrients, phytochemicals that do all sorts of different things. And then moving on to the yellow one, you've got complex carbohydrates. So again, about a third of what we eat needs to be those foods. Ideally whole grain, so they've got, again, fibre, like in the fruit and veg, they've got fibre in them, which is good for our guts. And these foods, so we're talking bread, potatoes, breakfast cereals, that kind of thing. those are our main energy source. That's like the petrol in the car. That's what our body prefers to run on. Now, we're a bit more flexible than cars, so we can run on other fuels as well. But carbohydrate is our main fuel, and it's particularly our brains have to have some. Then you've got the pink section, or red section, beans, pulses, fish, eggs, meat, and other proteins. So these are foods that contain protein, which is a building block. So it's something that we need for our bodies to grow and repair. We don't need, as you can see, it's not a third, so we don't need as much of them as we do of the fruit and veg and the carbohydrate foods. And we can have a bit, we can eat too much of those, and that can cause long-term damage to our kidneys and things like that. Meat is on there, but it's not essential. We don't have to eat meat, so that's how come people can be vegetarian or vegan. And actually, most people would benefit from eating less meat and more beans and pulses because those have got fibre in as well and probably other nutrients. And then you've got fish, which has a unique benefit in that it's got omega-3 fatty acids in, which is another building block, which is a kind of fat, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that's important for brain structure and those sorts of things. So it's essential because we can't make it ourselves. And then you've got milk, dairy foods and alternatives. Again, they've got protein in. And you don't have to have milk for health, just like you don't have to have meat. But if you don't eat milk and dairy products, then you will need alternatives, and they need to be fortified. So they've got things like there's minerals and fat-soluble vitamins that are really hard to get enough of if you don't have those foods. And then the small purple section is oils and fats. So we need a relatively small amount of those. It's things like spreads and cooking oil. So they've got a lot of fat in them. Fat is, as I say, it is required as a building block. All fats are to a degree. And you can burn them for energy. But we don't need a huge amount. And for the same reason, when you go to the meat and fish and things like that, you don't have to have lots of fat in those either. It is recommended to have the lower fat ones where possible for most people. So there are also some other foods and drinks outside of the plate. So you've got your highly processed foods like chocolate and crisps and stuff like that, biscuits. So they tend to be high in fat, high in sugar, and high in salt. Nutrients, all of which we tend to eat more of than we need. They also don't tend to have many other, like vitamins and minerals and things like that in. So they're not necessarily the best way of getting at the energy in the food. And on the other hand, they're very tasty. Because of all the fat and the sugar and the salt, they're really nice. They taste good, generally speaking. And they keep well. And they're often relatively cheap. So I think you can agree it's unrealistic to avoid them completely. But typically we tend to eat more of them than is beneficial for our health. So I think you can see that healthy eating isn't about extremes. When I was a dietitian, I would find out a person's starting point with their diet. It depended what their situation was. I would find out what they were eating, and then I would encourage them to make small changes that could be sustained long term rather than striving for perfection. And I always kept their individualised needs in mind and made sure that they did as well. And if there was something they needed to avoid, then I helped them to find alternatives. So I think that kind of way of thinking is really important for us doing this as well. So, yes, obviously, we're making changes for a month, but we may make changes that we're going to keep up long term. So we need to be thinking about that as well. There is a useful tool, which some of you have probably heard about, SMART goals. So it's an acronym thing. So when we're choosing to make changes, lifestyle changes, do something different, this is a really good way of thinking about that and really pinning down what it is we want to do. So make it specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and have a specified time range. So for us, it is this month initially. But think about, how can I set goals that I know that I'm doing what I said I was going to do? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited or time bound. And when I've thought about what we're going to do this month, I've thought there's 5 areas that I want to focus on, really, broad areas where we can make changes. So the first one obviously is eating healthier, because that's like a good thing for all of us to do. Also, linked to that, eating better in a way that benefits people and planet is another area you might want to focus on. It might just be you want to simplify how you're eating. You might want to, free up time and stuff. You might want to save some money and kind of have a reset there. And you might just want to explore food. All of those areas are interconnected, and any change that you make is probably going to have an impact on more than one of those. But if you think now what your priority is out of those 5, it will probably help you to decide what to do and to stay focused and on what you actually want to achieve with that SMART goal. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through each of them. I'm going to try not to take too long and just give you some ideas of things you could do and talk about, how that might work. So eating healthier. If you focus on this area, you may feel some benefits. You may not feel lots of benefits. You might not feel them in the short term. I can't promise anything, but you may well feel like you've got more energy, and that might help you to get stuff done quicker and have more free time to spend with Jesus, time to do the things that you're passionate about. It's not going to be a massive difference, but it may help. So I would recommend that you have a look at the Eat Well guide and reflect on where what you eat differs significantly from that. And think, is that a starting point for where you can set yourself a small goal? So it's things like adding a portion of vegetables to your evening meal every night. That could be your change for the month. Adding a portion of fruit to your breakfast or to your lunch. A little bit less clear goal, but something you could work on and think about how to do, is cutting down on processed food at your meals and maybe cooking more from scratch, which will then, you have less processed food. That could be better. Or it might be that you recognise that you eat a lot of processed food for snacks and you want to cut that down. So you maybe say, I'll have one less snack a day like that, but remember to replace it with something else that's healthier. You might want to just change to higher fibre carbohydrate foods like brown bread from white bread and things like that. You probably want to do that gradually, but that could be your goal over the month. Not eating lunches out, making your own lunches so you've got more control over what you're eating. It might be you think, I don't drink enough, I always struggle to drink enough, and working on drinking more and figuring out how you can do that. And then there's also, I'm not going to go into it now, but if you want to look into prebiotics and probiotics, increasing your intake of those sorts of foods you might find benefit in that as well. So if we move on to the next one, eating better for people and planet. So what we eat affects our health, but actually it affects more than that. We focused on changes that might benefit us, but actually we can benefit other people as well, and the environment, both here and around the world, because our food comes from all around the world. So hopefully it would benefit us as well if we do this. We'll probably feel happier about what we're eating. And you may find better, ethically and environmentally better food might actually taste nicer and be healthier too, so there's a bonus there. The sorts of things that you could look at is, could you eat more locally? That's probably the biggest one, eating more locally and more seasonally. We know as a country, like, we're very densely populated. We can't grow as much food as we consume. So we're always going to be eating food that's not from this country or not very local. But could you increase how much local food you eat? So you're reducing the food miles, the distance that your food is travelling to get to your plate. If you use local shops and market stalls that strive to stock local produce, that's going to be an easy, a way of changing one thing that's going to change a number of things in the long run. Even locally produced processed foods could be better choices than processed food that's coming from all around the world. And it means you're going to be supporting local families directly with their businesses. We'll talk about organic. You might get more organic produce. It's likely to be fresher and healthier, less packaging, and you may well find you find interesting products that you haven't seen before. So we've recently started shopping at a shop called Molly's Pantry, which it's a small family-run shop in Old Bletchley, and they started up at the beginning of the pandemic. Molly and Joe lost their normal income, and Joe had done fruit and veg delivery before, so he kind of had some contacts and started back up just doing deliveries, and that has rapidly grown. They've got a shop now. They do online delivery service for all sorts of foods, not just fruit and veg. So they stock things like bread and eggs, tinned goods, refill foods, like so you can bring your own packaging, ethical cleaning products, and a lot of vegan and allergy-friendly foods as well, plus locally made gifts and toiletries and cakes and stuff. So they try really hard to get all their produce locally. A lot of it is just from like 3 counties in this area, and they go out and meet their suppliers and have a good relationship with them. And I had a chat with them, and they said if anyone here wants to try shopping with them, they're happy to give you a 5% discount on fruit and vegetables this week if you go into the shop. I presume you could do it online as well if you put it in the box. So that's a great opportunity. But there are other similar shops in Stony Stratford and Newport Pagnell. They're kind of refill shops. They don't so much have the fruit and veg, and you'll find obviously market stalls and all sorts as well. There are in Milton Keynes. There are also specialists like Black and Sun Brewery brew beer in Stacey Bushes, and then there's the Willen Ice Cream Company that manufacture ice cream locally. So, and you'll probably find loads more that I don't know about. Moving on to Organic Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance, they're all different certifications. That you'll see the labels on the foods. You've got Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, and Soil Association Organic at the top. So they're the kind of gold standard organic certification. There's so much to say about this as well, but basically, if those certifications are on the packaging of a food, it means that those organisations have been involved in checking and supporting the companies that are making the food to have good labour standards, to pay their staff well, not using pesticides and having good farming practices, which is good for biodiversity and for the health of the land. So it's quite wide-ranging what that actually means. And whilst you can't guarantee that the food's going to be more flavourful and have more nutrients in it, I'd say it's pretty sure it does. But there is documented evidence that organic farms have more biodiversity, higher air quality, and higher staff welfare. That is shown. So it's a measurable difference. So as a family, we buy some organic produce in the shops, in the supermarket, and at Molly's, and we also get a vegetable box delivered by Riverford that's all organic. And they deliver other stuff as well, like meat and fruit and stuff. So we'd really recommend them. We've used them for years. And there's other organic box schemes as well that are worth looking into. So that's another option that you could get. Reducing packaging, obviously we've kind of talked about it. So the refill shops and things, there's, if you shop in these kind of shops, you may find that you can, your recycling sack is smaller at the end of the week. And then, this isn't going to be popular, but reducing meat, going vegetarian or going vegan is another option. The dairy industry and the meat industry are probably the worst environmentally, as the bit of our diet that causes the most damage environmentally, and we do tend to eat a lot of meat. So cutting down slightly may well benefit your health and also the environment as well, and obviously buying organic. So the thing to be aware of is if you're going to go completely vegetarian or completely vegan, which I wouldn't recommend in one go anyway, but if you're going to do that, you're going to need to make sure that you know what you're doing, because it is hard, when you look back at that Eat Well chart, it's harder to get all the nutrients that you need if you're going to do that. So you need to make sure you're getting all the things that you need. So don't just do it on a whim, but make sure you read up and learn more and get support. And then the last thing I wanted to say is, in this area, this is an area where we can make a positive contribution. So, sort of on one end of the scale, just taking food to the food bank. So that all the supermarkets, I think most of the supermarkets have a drop-off point for the food bank. If you're giving food to the food bank, you're contributing positively to somebody else's diet. You could also potentially volunteer at the food bank or the winter night shelter as they're feeding people. And community fridge, you can find out about whether there's, whether they need more volunteers. If you've got a lot of time, but not necessarily a lot of money, that's something that you could do. And the other thing is, if you've got a garden or any outside space really, you can reduce your food miles by growing your own stuff. So you could have a go at growing herbs or fruit or vegetables. Now, that's not something that's going to happen in the space of a month, but February is actually the perfect month for planning what you're going to grow for the year. This is when I need to get on with doing it. But this is when people who do garden, actually this is when we're planning. This is when we're buying seeds, thinking about where we're going to plant things and what we need to plant when. So it's a good time, if you're going to do that, now's the time to take that up, and that could be your thing. And starting in small ways, just growing herbs would be great. So moving on to the next one, simplifying. It really depends what you're doing at the moment, but have a think. Could you do some more meal planning that is kind of, so you're deciding once what to do. So you, for example, you could say, right, every week, this is what I'm going to have for dinner on a Monday, this is what I'm going to have on a Tuesday, this is what I'm going to have on a Wednesday. Every morning I'm going to have the same breakfast, every day I'm going to have the same lunch. Make sure it's healthy, but then once you've made that decision, it's just a rolling program. So for the month, you could see if you could just have a rolling program of simple meals that you can just do. It's going to save you time shopping and planning. Your brain's going to have a bit more space. And then choosing meals and snacks that require less preparation. The thing I think of is like your classic meat and 2 veg or pasta. There's loads of different ways that you can make an interesting meal quite quickly. So if you've got pasta, sweet corn and peas, you just got out of the freezer or a tin of tuna, and you could just put some tin tomatoes or tomato sauce on, and that's a meal, isn't it? And it's relatively quick. And there's lots of different variations on that, and the same with meat and 2 veg. You could have a piece of salmon one day and a piece of pork the next, and you could have different vegetables, and you could have couscous, or you could have rice, or you can have potatoes, and it's actually quite quick to cook, but it's nutritious. And that might be a way to simplify, depending on what you're eating now. Batch cooking is another way. It's a really good way. So if you cook a meal, if you go to the trouble of cooking something, if it's something that will keep, cooking enough for 2 days, 3 or more days, and putting it in the fridge or the freezer is something I do quite a lot. On Thursday, I made a spaghetti bolognese, and with the half of the mince and vegetables that was left, I then made chili con carne the next day just by putting some spices in and some kidney beans and reheating it and doing rice. It was much, much quicker on Friday. And you can literally, I mean, when I'm at home on my own and I'm decorating or gardening or something, and I know the kids and everyone are away for a couple of days, I make a big rice pudding and then I just eat that. I don't have to cook at all. I just eat a rice pudding. Now, you can't live on rice pudding, but for a few days, it's not going to do any harm. And then saving money. This one is, again, it just really depends what you're doing at the moment. But I've got some suggestions. Things like bulk buying, eating with other people, which then has an added benefit of being social. Something that I think we're going to do is eat what you already have. If you've got a well-stocked kitchen, and it's maybe even a bit too well-stocked, having a month where you just make an effort to eat your way through it all and use up all those tins that are almost out of date or whatever, that's going to save you money in the short term. It's not going to save you money in the long term, but it may save some stuff going to waste, and it will save you money in the short term. So that's a possibility. Obviously, remind you to use the community fridge and not let any of that go to waste. And think about what works for you. You know, are you having deliverers at the moment? Would you save money if you went into store? Could you do a little? I've done this before. Done a survey of how much things cost in a range of shops, and figure out where you buy what depending on where they're cheapest. So you might think Aldi is going to be cheapest for everything and Waitrose is going to be the most expensive, but you will probably find some things are cheapest in Waitrose and others are most expensive in Aldi. And it's just a case of putting the time in. It's, you know, not an insignificant amount of time. But you've got to remember that if you're doing that and you're running around 5 different shops, you're spending more on transport and you're taking more time. So you've got to balance it out. And then if you are eating out, obviously eating out less is going to bring your costs down quite a bit as well. So having a month where you eat out less or not at all. And then lastly, exploring. So if none of the other areas feel like the right thing, what you might need to do is just really embrace food. If you feel like you've lost the love for food and for meal times, you might want to sort of put your focus on exploring food and widening your horizons in one way or another. If you try new things, you will probably have bad experiences and find things you don't like. But you'll also probably have good experiences, and you can definitely, you know, have a laugh with other people as you chat through, you know, well, that thing I tried, it was disgusting. A good thing to do is just to make an effort to learn more about food, about cooking, about nutrition. It's by no means exhaustive, but I've got a list of things for each area, and really all of them are relevant to just learning more. So I will email that out, and you can have a copy now if you want. Try a new food. Just pick something that you've never had before and try it. Try it as a family or with friends. And more specifically, have a go at shopping in international shops, or try some vegan or veggie alternative foods. So the international shops in Bletchley are fantastic. There are so many. There's food from all around the world as you walk down Queensway, and I just love going in some of those shops, and I've got some suggestions of good ones on the sheet. Going there, just seeing something you've never eaten before, picking it out and trying it. Or you could do it with restaurants, and you can cook as well. So Jen Hatmaker when she did Simple and Free originally, some of her friends, when they did it with her, they did food, and they picked a country they wanted to pray for. So then they ate the food from that country, they prayed for that country, and they learned more about that country. So it was a real kind of multi-sensory thing. So you could do something like that. And also just having a celebratory meal with other people. Maybe this is your opportunity to plan something that you haven't done for the last couple of years because of the pandemic. This might be the time where you actually start getting together with people and really eat some special food that you wouldn't normally eat and celebrate together. And if you don't feel like now is the right time, maybe now is the time to plan it. So you could plan something for later in the year when it's warmer, a picnic or a barbecue that you can do outside. So I think that's mostly it. Thank you for listening. But in summary, I think there's lots of things we can do. I think you can see that. It's just a huge number of things. Think about what it is that... you can hand that out. Think about what has made you excited. Don't think about what's bothered you in the talk this morning, but think about what were the areas that actually got me excited. That's probably a good clue to what God wants you to do. If you've already decided what you want to do, that's great as well. But if not, spend some time reflecting on what might work for you in your circumstances. And if it all feels too much, that's fine. But if you want to just start with something small, that is always the better thing. Remember what I said, start with something small, and SMART goals, so something measurable that you can get some feedback and feel good about the fact you actually made that change. And if it's going really well, then you can do something more. But it's better to do something small than it is to try to do something bigger and then get disappointed when it just didn't work. And don't forget to talk to one another about what you're doing, whether it be in your small groups or just at home or, with friends. Just see how it goes. Enjoy the process.